Hey guys, back again with another video, another series review. It's been a long time since I've done one of these, and it's going to be on the Uncharted series, covering Uncharted 1 through 4, and then actually Golden Abyss on the Vita. And this might be a surprise to a lot of people because I've often shown my dislike for this series. And when I was house sitting a while back, I played through the trilogy, the remastered trilogy on PS4. And this was the first time I'd played through Uncharted 1 and 3, and I played Uncharted 2 when it came out, and I hated it. And I've the series has, I guess, grown on me a little bit. Finishing those three games, I felt like I kind of wanted to finish the series and do a review. I don't hate Uncharted 2 like I used to, but at the same time, this is not going to be one of my more positive series reviews. I think the series is incredibly overrated. I think there are a lot of flaws with it. And I guess I just want to talk about the series. I don't know how long this is going to be. This might go on for a while. This might be an hour-long video. I'm not sure. It might be split up into multiple parts. But as with all my other series review, I'm going to cover each game, and then at the end, I'm going to do my kind of ranking from my least favorite to my favorite game. Now, I'm going to try to not be too negative because for the most part, I did enjoy these games, at least some of them. But yeah, it might get a bit ranty at some time. Sometimes I'm probably going to be like a bumbling idiot sometimes because with story, I've always found like I'm kind of terrible at talking about stories with games, but I guess I'll try. But let's get started with the original Uncharted. I've got a bunch of notes here. I wrote down a ton of notes for this video. But yeah, we'll start with Uncharted Drake's Fortune. Yeah, it's a weird one to start off with because this series didn't get off to a strong start. I mean, this game reviewed well at the time when it came out, but I think people have been more harsh on it as time has went on, and it's aged pretty poorly, I'd say, even playing like the remastered version on PS4. Now, before I get into the series proper, I want to actually talk about the visuals and like basically on like a technical level for these games. And this is maybe going to be a bit of a rant. I'm not sure, but I'm going to talk about the visuals here in the beginning of the video for these games. And I'm probably not going to mention it again because, okay, yes, the Uncharted games, they've progressively gotten better with their visuals and presentation. And on a technical level, they look fantastic, especially Uncharted 4. Like the different views, all the different environments, the character models look amazing. I mean, Uncharted 4 is probably one of the best looking games I've ever played. It's incredible. And you can really tell that a lot of the budget with these games goes to making sure that it looks fantastic, it runs well, and that it's just a visually striking game. And it's one of those things where I can realize that. I can look at it and be like, yeah, these games all look incredible, but it's just not important for me. When I play these games, I look at story and most importantly, gameplay. Those are the most important things for me. And, you know, as amazing as these visuals are, it has such a low impact on my enjoyment of these games. And I feel like it's something that people talk about so much with these series. With the Uncharted series, and I feel like a lot of people prop these games up as really better than they are, and I feel a lot of that has to do with their visuals. People just talk about the visuals too much with these games, and it's just I've always said I think visuals are one of the least important parts of a game for me. And I think that holds true with these games, and it might be one of the big reasons why I am not on the whole as impressed with this series as a lot of people are. But I wanted to get that out of the way because I'm not going to be talking about the visuals again. It's not going to be a big, like I might cover it briefly in certain parts, but I don't know. I just don't find it to be that important when I'm talking about the series and for this series review. I'm sure other people probably have great videos on like the visuals for these games and the attention to detail that they have, but it's not going to be a strong focus for this video, so I wanted to get that out of the way. But with Uncharted 1. We'll start with the story here. I've got like a checklist of things here. Okay, so the story in the first Uncharted it's not good. It's pretty weak. Now, I like the characters, some of the characters they introduce here, and I like the characterization for a lot of them. Nathan Drake, I didn't immediately grow attached to him. He's a character that I kind of liked the more the series went on. But Sully, Victor Sullivan, he's introduced in this game, and he's probably my favorite character in the entire series. I think he's great. I like how kind of witty and funny he is. I really like the way that character is written. And in the later games, you get some really nice backstory with him. And I also like the relationship between Nathan Drake and Sully. So that's one of the things I did like with the story. I think the actual story that itself in this game is not impressive at all. It's very lighthearted. This game is probably the most lighthearted of all the Uncharted games. There's a lot of humor. I don't think it works most of the time. Some of the dialogue is fairly witty and entertaining, but a lot of it I just kind of rolled my eyes at. The villains in this game, I think, are very forgettable. In fact, I can't even remember, like, the main villain's name. In fact, it's one of those games, and I guess I should say, I'm going to put it in the description, but spoilers for all these games. I am going to go in depth here for a lot of them. So, yeah, if you haven't played the games, maybe you should play them first before watching this. But one of, like, the main villain for the game, I forget what his name was, but at the end, when it's shown that there's like this curse that kind of turned all these guys into monsters. He kind of gets turned into a monster and dies at the very end, and then this other character that you've barely gotten to know over the course of the game becomes the main villain and final boss of the game, which that reminded me of like a lot of movies and it reminded me of Indiana Jones in a way. This game has got kind of like I feel like the feel and tone of this game is the closest to Indiana Jones out of the entire series. I think it actually gets a little darker as the series goes on, but there's okay, like the cutscenes in this game I think aren't as directed well as they are in games later in the series. And with a lot of the stories in these games, there's a lot of problems in this first game that carry on to the other games. First off, conveniences. There are so many conveniences in this storyline, and I'll talk about this in other games as well. And it gets like I can't stand it. It just gets so terrible. Anytime like Nathan Drake gets out of these situations by like these crazy conveniences, it's absolutely ridiculous. There's a lot of plot holes. I'm not going to go over them. I'm actually really bad at finding plot holes, but it's one of those things that once I finish a game, I tend to look at what other people thought of the story and then see all the plot holes people came up with. And there's a lot in this first game. There's a lot of stupid shit in the story as well. I think for the most part, it's not very interesting. Now, there is less of a story focus in this game than the upcoming games in the series. There's just not as many cutscenes. The cutscenes in general are far shorter. There's not as much dialogue, and the storyline is probably the most simple of them all in the series, which I can see the appeal of that. But for me, I didn't find it terribly interesting, and I wasn't too attached to the characters just yet. So I thought the story overall was kind of weak in this game. And the environments in this game, like this could lead into the gameplay as well, but this game mainly takes place on a singular island, these like jungle type environments, and it gets old. It gets old. I really didn't care for that. The upcoming games in the series are kind of like these globe-trotting adventures, which I really liked. But yeah, I mean, that's about it with the story. I'm pretty bad at talking about stories. I'm not going to go in depth with like what the actual story was, but it didn't impress me. That's for sure. But we'll move on to gameplay now. And this first game, oh man, it's really weak with its gameplay. Let's talk about the gunplay first. And this is something that, as the series has gone on, has barely improved. I mean, it was probably at its worst in this game. For one, the aiming is atrocious. No matter what sensitivity you put it on, aiming never feels natural in this game. It just always feels off. And this is something that persists throughout the entire series, in my opinion. Bullet sponge enemies, this is another problem with this series from the start. It just takes way too many bullets to take these guys down. And there's so many enemies you're fighting. It takes like entire clips of your weapons. Ammo is a constant problem, and you have to manually pick up ammo for your weapons, and that's really frustrating too, especially with a cover shooter, where you constantly have to move from cover to cover, and you're constantly getting shot at because there's regenerating health. and trying to like run around trying to find ammo for the gun you have, or trying to find a new gun to pick up. It's just frustrating. I didn't enjoy it. One of the things with Uncharted 1, and luckily this improves with upcoming games in the series, the way combat encounters are designed, they're very lousy in this game, where you'll come to an area, you'll notice a bunch of chest-high cover spots, you'll get into the area, and then the enemies will spawn in, and you fight waves of enemies, you kill them all, you move on, you find the next area with chest-high cover. It becomes so predictable that it's not fun. And in fact, at times throughout this game, you actually see the enemies spawn in. And by the end of the game, I was actually predicting exactly where enemies were going to spawn in these combat encounters. It was ridiculous. And luckily, that's something that improved with more games in the series. The weapons just have like no impact whatsoever. Like the actual act of shooting enemies and hitting them and damaging them, there's the feel to it. It just doesn't feel good compared to a lot of shooters. The AI is very lackluster in this game. Like they just run around like idiots and just stay behind cover, popping out and shooting you. Yeah, not impressed with the AI in this game. There's generally too much shooting as well. There's more variety in upcoming Uncharted games, and we'll get to those. But this game, you're either doing a bunch of shooting or a bunch of climbing, and then there's like these terrible jet sequences, which I'll get to. So yeah, it's mind numbing. Honestly, this game, it's just so fucking boring, and it's just not satisfying. The gunplay is not satisfying. Like I don't know. But what else? The final boss in this game is terrible, where you have to you're behind all this cover, and he's got like all these enemies, and you have to kill the enemies before you attack him. And he's got this like one-hit kill rifle, where if you stay out of cover for just like a few seconds, you instantly die. And you have to kill all these enemies, and then he'll move up to a new area. And then you kill all the enemies there, he'll move up to an area. Eventually you get him on like this helipad, and you have to hide behind the boxes when he's reloading. If you don't do that, he kills you instantly. You rush up to him, you do this quick time event, he's dead, and the game's over. Really bad, frustrating final boss, like trial and error design completely. Yeah, the gunplay in this game is just not good. I pretty much despised it overall. There's the jet ski sequences that I just mentioned, and one of the notable things about the Uncharted series are the set piece moments, and that was something that was actually introduced with Uncharted 2. The closest you'll get with the original Uncharted are these jet ski sequences where you're basically traveling through this river, and there'll be these explosive barrels all over the place, and if you hit them, you die instantly. It's an instant game over, and you've got enemies all throughout the environment shooting at you, and they're really frustrating. They control like shit. The explosive barrels, it's often hard to tell where they're going to come from. Sometimes they come so fast that if you don't see it in like within a few seconds, you're going to die. So these sequences are long, they're tedious, they're filled with trial and error. They suck. I know they were probably added to have a bit of variety to the gameplay, but they're plain bad. Okay, let's talk about the climbing now, which is an important part of the Uncharted series. And it's probably at its most basic here, where it's this. I've got a huge issue with the climbing in this series overall. And I guess I'll start here. I'll have like the long form discussion here with Uncharted 1, where you're basically looking for handholds, and you're just moving from handhold to handhold to get to where you need to go. And usually there's only one set path. And if you even once try to find like some alternate path, or try to go the way the game a way that the game developers don't intend for you to go, you'll fail. You'll die instantly. And these climbing sequences require almost no input from the player. They are barely interactive. There's hardly any risk or danger to them. If you do happen to die, which sometimes you will, because sometimes it will look like a handhold is there that you'll be able to grab, and you try to grab it, and nope. Nathan just doesn't grab it and falls to his death. I can't tell you how many times this fucking happened. Just because I didn't know the exact way Naughty Dog wanted me to do these climbing sequences. Now there is some impressive skill to some of this stuff, especially when you're climbing like really high up. But overall, it's like such brain dead shit. Like it was never fun. And a lot of the times these climbing sequences went on too long. There's one in the beginning of this game, Uncharted 1, that just goes on forever. And it just doesn't evolve. It barely evolves. It remains like the same throughout the entire game. I really did not care for the climbing in this game, and it's something I haven't really cared for throughout the entire series because it barely improves. But we'll get to that later. There's puzzles in the Uncharted games. They're always quite simple. Unfortunately, they're almost all the same thing. Like, it's always just referring to your notebook to look at different symbols, and then like matching those symbols in the book to the puzzle that you're currently doing. Sometimes they get more elaborate, and I'll talk about that more with upcoming games. But the puzzles in this game are probably at the most simple they've ever been with the series. Now, I don't know if I would say I hate the puzzles. It maybe adds a little bit of variety, but they're not fun. I don't find them enjoyable, and honestly, throughout the entire series, I don't think I liked a single puzzle. Yeah. They're actually probably the most annoying in Uncharted 4, but I can't say the puzzles in the first three games at least were ever annoying, but I can't say I had much fun. Okay, we're gonna talk about cover shooters here. A lot of my main discussion points with the series are probably start here, so this might be like the longest section of this video. But cover shooting, in my opinion, is inherently flawed. I don't know why this type of shooter got popular. I think there's just so much wrong with cover shooters. Before we get into that, though, this game, you can only carry 2 weapons at once, which I always hate in shooters. I guess they're trying to be realistic, but in a game that's so over the top, I don't see why you couldn't carry at least like 4 weapons. But yeah, I've always hated weapon limitations like that, and I hate it here. But yeah, before we get into the cover shooting, there's a few things I want to mention. No auto ammo pickup, and this is something that only the Vita game did, where basically if you have a weapon, we'll say like the Paris pistol or whatever, and you're running low on ammo, and you need more ammo for it, you have to manually pick up the ammo for that weapon. You don't just walk over it and you pick up the ammo and you can just reload. No, you have to scour the environments while enemies are shooting at you, trying to find the ammo for your weapon. And Uncharted 4 doesn't even have this, and it was one of the most welcome additions to the Vita game, and I'm shocked that this whole series has went on and it's never been added, because it would really, I think, make the flow of battles much smoother. Honestly, it's just tedious to have to pick up ammo constantly. But yeah, it's a cover shooter. So, being a cover shooter, Nathan Drake's movement options are extremely limited. He's very slow, and there's no run. You can't run in this game. Your default movement is like this small run. It's not very fast. And you press the circle button to do this roll. It's not very reliable. You can get shot at while you're rolling and be hit by bullets while you're in the middle of the roll. Snapping to cover is very finicky. Moving from cover to cover is also finicky, and it's very easy to get shot at. Enemies are actually quite fast, and they're actually a little stupid at Uncharted 1. They don't run around as much as later games, but they're quite fast, and honestly, it's almost like they move at a faster speed than you do, while you're like really slow, and moving from cover to cover is not satisfying. Regenerating health is this thing that completely destroys the flow of gunfights for me. I much prefer like a health pickup system where if you're low on health, you got to find like a spot to hide and just stay there while your health gets goes up to the max. I hate that so much. And it's especially frustrating in like these huge environments where enemies are all surrounding you. It's hard to tell where enemies are shooting you from sometimes. And if you happen to be in a bad cover spot and an enemy spawns behind you and starts shooting at you, you'll die quick. Nathan does not have much health in this game, which is another thing that really frustrated me. Like cover shooters are just so slow, and I honestly don't find them fun. They're just so problematic for me, and it's I don't know, man. I really hope cover shooting is just something that fucking dies. I don't know. I really hate the move to like third person cover shooters. How like almost like there's just so many of them still. But yeah, that's my whole cover shooting rant. There's melee combat. It's really bad and it's really basic. You just like hit square and triangle and just like mash buttons. I think there was like a grappling. It might have been in this game. I don't know. Like the melee combat kind of gets improved very slightly from game to game, but it's really bad. Sometimes it can be helpful. Like if an enemy tries to rush you, oftentimes it's actually better just to mash square and finish them off. I think there's like a brutal melee move that you can only do in Uncharted 1. I forget how you use it, but yeah, the melee combat is not great in this game either. Yeah, I've been shitting on this game with its gameplay. I just think gameplay-wise, it's awful. Like it's plain bad. The only thing I liked, and this is kind of like this minor thing, there's unlockables. You collect treasures throughout the environments. And you'll get these unlockable cheats, which I kind of miss in games. And there's like visual filters that you can have. The game's extremely linear as well. I've never been a big fan of how linear these games are. There's like no exploration whatsoever, and I've just preference wise, I'm just not into that. And Uncharted 1 has got to be probably the most linear in the entire series. But yeah, I mean that covers gameplay. So yeah, Uncharted 1 overall, not a fan. I didn't care for it. I wanted to play it because, I have to play all the games, and I kind of wanted to see where it started. But it's one of those odd things where it's like this really popular series that started off with honestly a pretty bad game. It might have been okay. It would have been like okay back when it came out, but it's one of those games I think it's just going to age worse and worse and worse over the years. But yeah, that's Uncharted 1. Okay, moving on to Uncharted 2, the big one, and this is considered one of the best games ever made, and that's something I can't agree with. I have this is one of those games. It's weird. I enjoyed it more playing it this time than I did when it came out, but I still hold the opinion that this is probably the most overrated game ever made. I just do not understand how anyone could think this is like one of the best games ever made. In fact, I can think of like 30 games last generation that I think are better than Uncharted 2. But anyways, let's actually talk about the game. We'll start with the story. And, the big thing, Uncharted 2 was considered like this massive improvement over the first game. And in some ways, it definitely was. It's definitely a better game than the first one. In fact, I would say that this is actually a good game overall, which I can't say about the first one. Story. The presentation of this game, I think there was a huge leap. The cutscenes are far better directed. There's a lot more of them. In fact, this game has a heavier story focus than the first game. The presentation's fantastic. The visuals are a hell of a lot better in this game. And right off the bat, the story was way more interesting to me. I had actually forgotten a lot about the story with this game because the last time I played it was back when it came out in 2009, I think. But right off the bat, I was invested. I was interesting. By this point, I kind of liked Nathan Drake as a character. I liked Elena, although she's actually different in this game. She was a lot more kind of like humorous and outgoing and just kind of like spontaneous in the first game. Her personality kind of changed with this one. She's a far more serious character, and in fact, the game overall it's still fairly lighthearted. There's a lot of witty lines and jokes, and Nathan is still like this wisecracking guy. Sully is pretty similar too in this game, but it's darker. This game is definitely darker than the first. But it still kind of has that Indiana Jones type feel. The beginning, they introduced two new characters, Chloe, who's sort of a romantic interest of sorts. She's okay. I kind of prefer Elena for some reason. I don't know, something about Chloe, like she's not bad, and I like what she adds to the story. But I don't know. I don't know what do people think of Chloe? Like I get the feeling that she's probably a well liked character. I don't know. Something about her just rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Like her personality, I'm not crazy about, but she's fine. But there's also Flynn, who's like this backstabbing asshole. I actually kind of like Flynn. He's he's kind of like this loser. Like he's kind of useless. But I don't know. I kind of love to hate the guy. And I think his arc throughout the game was kind of interesting. The writing overall, I think, is better in this game. The story itself, honestly, it's kind of dumb. Honestly, I didn't care for it a whole lot. I think it starts off pretty interesting, but once you got to like what was it, Shangri-La, and the Yeti monsters started to be introduced, and all the supernatural elements came in. That's when it started to lose me. That's when I just started to get it. I don't know. Uncharted 1 had supernatural elements as well, and I've just never been a big fan of that in like TV, movies, or games. And it just, I don't know, it was just jarring to me, and it just got really stupid at the end. I don't know. The villain, how do you pronounce his name? Lavarajek? I can't, I don't know. I'm really bad at pronouncing his name. I need to hear it again, but he's kind of like this over the top kind of villain. He's shown to be decently ruthless, but there's a moment in this game where he could have been like a real, bad guy, but I don't know. He's not. I feel like he could be more intimidating, but I kind of like the over the top campiness of him. I think he's a far more interesting villain than the one in Uncharted 1, but I don't think he's perfect. I don't know, but he's fairly effective. The cinematography is like much improved in this game with these cutscenes and like the set pieces. The voice acting is phenomenal. It's very cinematic, that's for sure, and they got that part of it right. But I don't know. Again, like that's not like for me with video games. I don't know, when video games try to be more like a movie than a game. It's never been my thing. The environment variety is a lot better in Uncharted 2. It's this globe-trotting adventure now, and that I liked. That was a change that I really appreciated. But yeah, overall the story, I liked the characters well enough. And there was the writing generally was decent, but like with the previous games, there's a lot of conveniences, a lot of plot holes, and I just thought it just got silly and stupid at the end. But it's certainly well produced. But let's get into the gameplay for Uncharted 2, which honestly it's not that much of an improvement over the first one. Okay, we'll start with the final boss. A weird thing to start with, but I've got my notes in like a weird order here. The final boss in this game is fucking terrible. It's atrocious. I like the bosses in the series have always been bad. The boss in Uncharted 1 was terrible as well, but at least it was brief. You got through it fast. In this, it's this really gamey boss that just is not fun, and it's tedious and goes on forever, where he's basically running around and he's like this superpower. He's like superpowered and immortal, and the only way to damage this guy is to shoot these blue resin things that cause explosions. So you're running away from this guy in this really annoying environment where you're constantly bumping into cover spots and jumping over things. And there's bottomless pits in this place too, which is really annoying. But you're running away from this guy and you're trying to lure him to these like explosive points, and it takes forever. And there's like these little cutscenes that happen when you damage him enough that get really old. And it was like, I hated this boss. Like, I fucking hated it. It's my least favorite boss in the entire series. And honestly, it's probably one of the worst final bosses I've ever seen in a game. I might be, like, that might be a minority opinion. I think a lot of people would consider some of the other bosses in the series to be worse, but I did not enjoy that final boss at all. Okay, let's talk positive though with Uncharted 2. The pacing is a lot better. In fact, the pacing overall is quite good. There's some lulls, but the added set pieces, which we'll talk about those later, and the variety with with the combat encounters compared to the first game, made it so that I felt like it was just paced better, and I was able to play the game for longer sessions. Uncharted 1, I could only put a few hours in before I had to stop playing, but this one I put in some long sessions. Um, I'm just looking here. I guess okay. The combat encounters are probably one of the big differences with this game. Where you know what I said with the first game, it was just you enter area with a bunch of chest high cover, kill a bunch of enemies, move on. This game, when you reach areas, there's a lot of areas where you can take out guys stealthily, and there's a lot of like patrolling enemies. It's not immediately obvious when you're gonna get into a combat encounter anymore, and just the way they kind of present these combat scenarios to you, and then of course having like the set piece moments, and the environments just being a lot more open in general. It didn't feel as stale as with the first game, and that kind of helps with the pacing as well. There is stealth in this game. It's not that satisfying. I don't think it's that good. It feels tacked on in a lot of ways. Where you basically just kind of come up behind an enemy, press square, and you can take them out. You can be on like hanging on a ledge and pull them up over off the ledge. I do like how a lot of the combat encounters encourage you to use stealth, and it's not a huge deal if you eventually get caught and you just mop up the rest of the enemies. But there was a stealth section in the beginning of Uncharted 2 that I hated. I couldn't stand it because it's one of those stealth segments that I've talked about before that I fucking hate. The insta-fail stealth sequence where as soon as you're caught, game over. Start again. The checkpointing is at least generous because at least they know it's bullshit. It's bullshit trial and error, which I've always hated. It went on for way too long. I did not enjoy that because when you force stealth on me, that's when I get frustrated. But stealth as an option, I'm okay with that. But overall, I don't think the stealth is anything spectacular in this game. Gunplay is almost the exact same as the first game. The aiming still doesn't feel right. It's got all the problems I have with cover shooters in general. The enemies are still damage sponges. The controls just are so sloppy to me. I don't know. Again, I like Uncharted 2 is considered like this amazing game, but to me, in order to consider it like a masterpiece, the gunplay would have had to been like improved by a lot, and it's just not. It's barely better than what it was in Uncharted 1. And the only reason why I think I enjoyed it more overall in this game is just because, like, you know, with the variety of different combat encounters and the fact that you can use stealth, and there's just a little more options in general. And then, of course, you have the set piece moments. But I can't say I enjoyed the gunplay. It's just, it's never been good in this series. I don't think it was particularly good here. Puzzles are back. They're maybe a little better than the first game, a little more complex, but it's still kind of the same shit where you're looking at your notebook and matching symbols. I don't know. I wasn't crazy about the puzzles either in this game. Melee combat is still terrible. The AI on enemies I think is maybe slightly better, but it's still not great, honestly. Climbing is still in the game. Now, there's a few differences with the climbing here. The climbing was often like just moving from handhold to handhold in the first game. There's a lot of moments in that first game where, oh, you grab onto a ledge and, oh, it breaks and you fall onto a lower ledge and, oh, wasn't that tense? No, it's not. There's a lot of that kind of shit in this game, but the visuals are a little better. Like there's more spectacle to these climbing sections now. Right in the beginning of the game, you have this train, this derailed train that's hanging off a cliff, and you're climbing up this train, and there's a lot of spectacle to it, which is something the first game didn't really have with its climbing sections. Unfortunately, it's still the same brain dead shit. Moving to handhold, there's always only one way to get to where you need to go, and these sections just go on for too long. And they don't evolve. There's one section later in the game, the snow cave area, where you're with that one character, and this section, before this section, you had this like long walking, like basically non-interactive section. It was kind of like a break for the pacing, because it was like a lot of action moments and set pieces before that. But then you have like this snow cave section with all these climbing parts, and I hated this part. It went on forever. And again, there was like hardly no risk or danger to that section. And when you do die, it's just, you get checkpointed to the back to like maybe 10 seconds ago. I really did not like that section of the game. Like, I hated it. But yeah, like with the first game, I didn't like any of the climbing in this game, really. The spectacle was not enough to make me enjoy it, because there's not enough to it. It needs to be more complex for me. Now... the game's also really linear too, like the first game. Like the areas are maybe a little bit more open, but it's still very linear. There's not a whole lot of ways to take down enemies. The level design is also very rigid. You basically have to play it the way the developers intended. The fall damage in this series is really annoying too, where like there's a lot of times where Nathan will drop down to an area to get to where he needs to go, and there's some of these drops are pretty high, and he survives them. But then during some of these climbing sections, there's like these really low drops that you think you can make it, and I drop and I die. You instantly get a game over. I cannot believe how many times that happened. Throughout Uncharted 2, and in fact the whole series. It's just one of those things that always stuck out to me. But okay, the last thing I'll talk about are the set pieces. The big reason why so many people love this game, and honestly, I don't think they're that impressive. I really don't. So there's a lot to talk about here, but okay, my problem with these set piece moments in these series. In this series, for one, it's almost like this, like a magic trick, basically, where when you're going through them and everything's going the way it's intended, and you're doing everything the developer intends, and it looks great, the spectacle's there, you kind of feel like a badass going through this section. But as soon as you kind of take a step back and try and really analyze what you're going through, that's when it becomes less and less impressive. These kind of scripted set piece sequences, because as soon as you do something that the developers don't expect you to do, and I'm the kind of player that does this shit a lot, it completely breaks. The illusion breaks, the immersion breaks, and a lot of the times you'll fail. You'll flat out just die. And I guess I should probably talk about some examples here. We'll go with the moving train sequence in Uncharted 2 around the halfway point, where you're basically, this train is going like super fast, and the environment is constantly changing, which is fairly impressive. But you're moving from train car to train car, killing enemies, and it's there's like this great visual flair to it, and there's this great spectacle to it, and you're killing all these enemies, of course, with this like really terrible, well, not terrible, but mediocre gunplay, but it feels kind of cool. But then they introduce these signs, like these beeping signs, that if you're standing on top of the train and they hit you, you die. And if you don't know to expect this, you only have a few seconds to get to where, like, the right spot you need to be. And if you're not, you're going to die instantly. And as soon as you die, that's when these sequences are far less impressive, because you get thrown back at a previous checkpoint. You have to do it all again. And it's just that, the first time you go through these set pieces, they're fairly cool. It's on repeat playthroughs and repeat tries of these things that they're just not that impressive. I was really getting kind of frustrated with them. There's a tank sequence later in the game too, where you're kind of going through all like these buildings and back routes through these buildings while this tank is shooting at you, and if it hits you, it's basically a one-hit kill. and there's like this very specific path that you have to take. And there's this one path you have to take that's actually kind of hard to spot, and the tank's nearby shooting you. And I think Nathan even says in dialogue, got to get behind the tank. So I assumed, okay, I just go out and run behind the tank. But every time you do that, it just kills you. So I was restarting this like set piece over and over again and questioning, what the fuck am I supposed to be doing here? And it was so frustrating. And this set piece that seemed really cool, all of a sudden I was hating it. I couldn't stand it until I realized, oh, there's like this little side path that doesn't even look like it's actually a part of the environment you can go through. And then that's the very specific way you got to go to avoid this tank. You have to go to these very specific sections with the rocket launchers and shoot from there. If you try to shoot from like all these different areas, you're not going to be able to do it. It's like these very specific areas. These set piece moments are so rigid in their design, and if you screw up slightly just once, it's just like the illusion is shattered. And they're so like focus tested. Like, I don't know if that's really the right word, but they're like this design by committee thing to be as visually impressive as possible, and not without really thinking about, is this going to be fun mechanically? Is this going to be satisfying to do over and over again if someone fails? Is this going to be satisfying even going through them, just having one specific way to get through it? There, Uncharted 3, I'll talk about them a bit more because there's other examples I can give there, where if you really just stop and just try not to play the sequence at all, they really fall apart as well. It's just, I don't know. For me, they just weren't impressive. There's hardly any interaction from the player for these sequences. There's a part where you have to jump from car to car, killing enemies, and at a very specific time, you're supposed to jump from one car to the other. Cars will explode at a predetermined time. And if you're too late on that, you'll instantly fail. There's a lot of trial and error to these set piece moments, and yeah, if you're going through them your first time and you're doing everything right, you're doing exactly everything the developers intend for you to do, it's going to feel impressive. It is, but it's one of those things when I really take a step back and look at the design of them, I don't think they're that impressive. I don't know. It's weird. Like, maybe I wasn't explaining. I probably didn't explain that a whole well. It's a little hard to explain in words. Like, I'm pretty bad at explaining it, but I don't know. I just don't think they're that great, honestly. I wasn't really impressed with any of them, really. I just found them to be exercises in trial and error, and I found a lot of them to just honestly be frustrating. As cool as they looked, and again, I said before in my previous video, like, like the visual spectacle to it, the cinematic quality to it, it doesn't have an impact on me. It doesn't affect my enjoyment, like, at all. But yeah, that's my set piece rant. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like they get a little better as the series has gone on. It's weird because Uncharted 2 is known for them, but honestly, I think it's got probably the weakest set pieces in the series, to be honest. But yeah, that's Uncharted 2. I have a lot of issues with the gameplay. I don't think the story's that great. I don't know. I still think it's overrated. I enjoyed my time with it generally. I guess, but I don't know. It just doesn't do it for me like it does a lot of people, and maybe a lot of that is preference. Maybe it's just not the type of experience I want from a game, at least as far as gameplay goes. But yeah, that's Uncharted 2. Okay, and Uncharted 3. And this is a weird one. It got amazing reviews when it came out, but I think opinions of this on this game have been a bit mixed since it came out. In fact, I know a lot of like Uncharted fans that don't think this game is that good. It was a weird one for me because I actually enjoyed it. I liked Uncharted 3. It's got a lot of issues, but there was quite a few things that I admired about it. But let's get into it. I was actually kind of surprised by Uncharted 3. I liked it way more than I was expecting to. But story. We'll start with the story. For one, there's a lot of flashback sequences in this game, and it delves more into Nathan Drake's backstory. In fact, there's a sequence where you play as a young Nathan Drake, and it fleshes out Nathan as a character and Sully as a character, and kind of their relationship. And anytime the game was focused on that, I was loving it. I was finding it really interesting because again, Sully is like one of my favorite characters. So all of that stuff was really interesting. The main story itself is problematic. It's fairly ambitious, but it's there's a lot of plot holes. There's a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of conveniences. The villains are very lame and flawed. Talbot, who is like the henchman for the main villain Marlowe, like this guy is probably one of the worst antagonist characters I've seen in a game. Like he was awful, and so many conveniences based around him. The final boss fight in this game was really terrible against him too, but it was brief. In fact, it's like the shortest final boss battle in the series, so it actually ended up being my favorite, anyways. Marlowe is not a particularly interesting villain. I don't think she's very threatening. Her motives are kind of, I don't know. I wasn't crazy about her motives. The way she died was hilarious. I thought it was pretty funny and actually pretty brutal for her. But there, like the story is a mess. Like it's a mess, and it actually gets worse the more you get into it. Towards the end of the game, it really falls apart. There's no supernatural elements to it though, which I liked. You still fight like a monster type enemy later, but it turns out that was just like an hallucination from the drinking water. I'll talk about that a bit more later here. But I actually liked that there was no supernatural element to this game. One of the new characters for this game is Charlie Cutter, and this guy is fucking awesome. And this is probably one of the big reasons why I actually enjoyed Uncharted 3 quite a bit. His dialogue was great. He's this really hilarious character. I loved his personality. And there was a fairly, like, it wasn't a huge focus on him, but there was enough of a focus on him as a character that I really appreciated. Unfortunately, he just disappears with, I guess it's sort of a good reason, not really, breaking his leg there, that he just completely disappears from the plot. Kind of a bummer. I would love to see more of that guy. He really elevated the story for me. I just loved anything involving him. Even some of like the really bad plot elements where he gets like the dart in his neck and then he starts to act all crazy. But he's got some interesting character quirks too. The whole claustrophobia thing was pretty interesting. But yeah, Charlie Cutter is awesome. Like one of my favorite characters in the entire series. Like I thought he was great. Sully is fantastic in this game as well. It's got the same great directing, cinematography, and presentation as Uncharted 2. There's a lot more over-the-top moments in this game too. I feel like there's actually more set pieces in this game. I think they're actually better, but we'll get to those in the gameplay. But yeah, the story is weird. It was entertaining. I was always entertained by this story, despite the many plot holes and conveniences. But overall, I actually kind of enjoyed it. But towards the end, there are some storytelling mistakes that just really pissed me off. And this is getting into spoilers, but I've already spoiled so much here. And that's the Sully fake out that happens towards the end of the game, where Nathan Drake drinks this water it's like a main plot element, but it makes people hallucinate and go crazy. And basically, he starts hallucinating, and in the very beginning, Sully gets shot by Talbot and dies. And at this part, I didn't really clue into the fact that there was something wrong with the water, and I actually didn't even notice the fact that Nathan actually drank the water like pretty much right before Sully gets shot. So maybe a little bit of it is my bad, but this was this amazing moment. When this happened, I was just like, whoa. Wow, the game has balls. The Uncharted series has balls. And I was pissed off. In a good way though. I wanted revenge so bad on Marlowe and Talbot, and I was really into it. I was like, yes, this is great. It's like this great I don't know, it was this great emotional moment that really hit me hard, especially because Sully was a great character. But then you go through this hallucination sequence, you're fighting all like these fire monsters, which at that point I was like, oh, I thought, because I was really thinking there was not going to be anything supernatural. So I was like, I don't like this. I didn't like fighting them. They were annoying. But I was still into it because of the Sully death. But then it turns out that, of course, that you drinking the water would just made you hallucinate and go crazy. And it turns out, no, Sully didn't actually die, and there are no monsters, which, yeah, I like the fact that there aren't any actual supernatural elements to this game, but that is such a manipulative move that they did with that fake out death. They didn't need to do that at all. If you're not going to have the balls to kill off a character, don't pull that kind of shit. Like, that actually, like, really, it ended the game off on like a sour note. And then there's like a bunch of other things with like the ending, and overall third act of that game that I didn't care for. But that was probably one of my least favorite things about Uncharted 3. Like, that pissed me off. And the whole series in general just does not have the balls to kill off characters. It's one of the things that's really bugged me about the series. It's way too safe in that regard. But that part of the story really drove me nuts. But gameplay, it's certainly not the jump from Uncharted 1 to 2, but I do think it's actually better gameplay-wise than Uncharted 2. I think this game has the best pacing in the series. It's got like equal parts climbing, shooting, and even though there's more set pieces, I like the set pieces more in this game. I still, all the things I talked about before with the Uncharted 2 still kind of apply to these ones, but I feel like they had less trial and error in this game. The sinking ship set piece I thought was really well done, and you had to like look at your environment in a totally different way, and it kind of changed the climbing a little bit. Of course, the illusion breaks because there's one part where water is flowing into the ship and you're fighting enemies while water is flowing in. But if you kill all the enemies and just stand there and look at the water flowing in, you'll notice it doesn't actually like the water doesn't rise. It's like kind of static. So that immediately kind of broke the set piece for me a bit, but it was still decent. There's some good chase sequences that, of course, still have a bunch of trial and error, but maybe I like the set pieces more in this game because I actually did a lot of them on my first try. There was a burning building one that I thought was impressive visually, but I was able to get through it first try. If I was to die at any point during that sequence, it immediately would have pissed me off, probably. But I don't know. I feel just like you have a little more control in these set pieces. There's like this convoy sequence in the desert where you're jumping from car to horse, and it's just you don't have to be on a specific vehicle and kill specific enemies to progress through that set piece. You can kind of play it the way you want, which I enjoyed. So yeah, I think the set pieces still have major flaws. I think for the most part they're not terribly impressive, especially when you really kind of distance yourself from them and really really kind of look into how you're playing them and what exactly you're doing in these set pieces. But I did like them more than Uncharted 2. Gunplay is the exact same as Uncharted 2. It's still mediocre. Barely improved stealth and melee. I think the melee is a little deeper, but it's mostly just mashing triangles, square, and circle. The puzzles are actually probably the best in the series in Uncharted 3, actually. I didn't mind them in this game. They were a little more complex. They seemed to get more complex from game to game, but they weren't ever annoying. They required at least a little bit of thought this time around. I think there was maybe a little too many of them for my tastes, but for the most part, I somewhat enjoyed them, which is more than I can say for the rest of the puzzles in the series. Climbing is still the same. I mean, there's some sequences that are decent, like I mentioned, the sinking ship, where you're like, I don't know, the climbing in the sinking ship section was kind of interesting with all the flowing water, and you're like climbing up like a bunch of different parts of the environment that are like upside down, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like there actually was probably maybe less climbing in Uncharted 3 than Uncharted 1 and 2. In fact, it probably has the least amount of climbing in the entire series. And that might have been another big reason why Uncharted 3 I actually liked. There's these spider sections that I thought were really annoying. You're running away from these spiders. They're constantly hitting you, and you have to have like fire to shoo them away. And you're throwing like torches in these like braziers that... they light up the area, and then the spiders will back off. Like, those sections I really did not care for. But yeah, I mean, gameplay, it's kind of the same as Uncharted 2. There's really not many improvements, but like I said, the pacing I think was better. I like the set pieces a little more. There was less climbing. I like the puzzles. Like, it's everything from an Uncharted 2, but everything just felt kind of slightly better for me. there's still a lot of trial and error design in the game. There's a lot like of there's a few annoying combat encounters. There's this one there's also the desert sequence in this game, which I hate. There's a lot of like walking sequences where you're just walking really slowly, non-interactive, very scripted, that just go on for too long. But there's this one combat encounter that really frustrated me, where it's like a bunch of enemies, like super armored enemies, super powerful enemies, and it's like this wide open desert area, but you've got like the structure in the middle with like these supports that look like you can break them. And I spent, because there's so many enemies on the structure that you have a hard time shooting them, and I think they were behind turrets even, some of them. And I was using like my machine gun and pistol to break these supports, and it was taking so long, and I was getting shot at from everywhere that I was constantly dying, and I was getting very frustrated. And of course, it turns out, no, what you have to do is get this like really powerful automatic weapon right in the center underneath the structure, and those destroy the supports in seconds. So of course, again, one of those combat encounters that's like, there could have been a lot of freedom to that, but no, you're meant to be doing it in an exactly specific way that the developers intend for you to do. Really frustrating. But yeah, basically that's Uncharted 3. Okay, now Uncharted Golden Abyss on the Vita. A lot of people, if they were doing an Uncharted series review, I don't think they would include this one, but why the hell not? I decided I'd play through it. Uh, yeah, did not care for this one so much. Now, Naughty Dog did not develop this game. Ben Studio developed this game, and actually their newest game is that Days Gone game, that generic-looking zombie game that was shown at E3. But yeah, this is on the Vita. Let's talk about the story first. It reminds me of the first Uncharted in a lot of ways. Like, this game almost feels like a portable Uncharted 1. The story is similar to that first game. It's fairly simplistic. It's incredibly dull. Like, I did not care about the story whatsoever. There's a few new characters. Dante, who's kind of like a friend. I don't know why Nathan is friends with this guy, because this guy is this backstabbing asshole. He reminds me of Flynn, but he's even worse. And this guy's even a bigger loser than Flynn is. But I kind of liked that about him. Again, in the same way with Flynn, I kind of enjoyed that. I thought he was a great foil to Nathan throughout the entire story. There's also a female character named Chase that kind of accompanies you throughout the game. I thought she was really annoying. I did not care for her whatsoever. The dialogue is not as good as previous Uncharted games. There's definitely not as much of a story focus this time around, too. The cutscenes are nowhere near as well produced as they are in the PS3 games. The environment variety, like with the first game, is like non-existent. Again, it's like almost all jungle environments. There's a few cave environments, but that's about it. It takes place before Uncharted 1. I mean, the production values, I guess, are fairly impressive for a Vita game. I mean, it feels like Uncharted 1 on the Vita, which, well, I guess that's not too big of a deal, but there's not really too much to say about the story. It's just, I don't know, it didn't do much for me at all, basically. Gameplay, and I don't want to, I don't want to talk about this game too much. There's not a whole lot to say. It's okay. The weird thing is, we'd think with the two analog sticks on the Vita that a third-person shooter would control decently, but it took me a while to get used to this. Those analog sticks are actually not the greatest for shooters. I had to really mess with the sensitivity to make it so that I could actually play the game properly. It was rough at first. Eventually, I kind of got used to it, but the aiming just always felt super slow and sloppy in this. Even compared to like Uncharted 1. The gunplay is almost identical to the other Uncharted games too, although it's probably more comparable to the first Uncharted game. There are no set pieces in this game, which kind of makes sense because the production values are a lot lower, and the visual fidelity, of course, and on a technical level, it doesn't compare to the PS3 games. So there aren't really any set pieces. It's a lot of shooting and a lot of climbing, which that sucks. That definitely sucks. Like with the first Uncharted, I can only play this game for short periods. The pacing, I think, is kind of poor, mostly because it's like Uncharted 1. There is one good addition to the gameplay for this game, which I don't know why Uncharted 4 didn't take this. And that's the auto pickup of ammo. If you've got a certain weapon that needs ammo, and there's ammo for that on the ground, and you walk over it, you automatically pick it up. You don't have to press the triangle button. Amazing. But the really bad thing with this game is all the gimmicky touchscreen garbage. Like all the puzzles involve this. Basically, you have to like. There's a lot of items you pick up and you dust them off by rubbing on the touchscreen. You rotate the items by using the rear touchpad. There's all sorts of gimmicky garbage like that. There's a lot of quick time events where you have to swipe against the screen. It just always gets in the way. It always interrupts gameplay. It's never fun. A lot of times it's actually pretty frustrating. The only thing I liked were like these kind of puzzles. They're basically like puzzles where you drag puzzle pieces and kind of make a picture. Those were okay, I guess. But other than that, it's all gimmicky garbage. Of course, being a Vita launch was it a launch title? I don't think it was a launch title, but it was close to launch. So of course it had to use the rear touchpad, which is like the worst thing ever. Like that is one of the worst ideas for like a handheld or console I've ever seen. Like it's just garbage. But yeah, that's about it with Uncharted Gold Abyss. There's not much to say. I didn't care for it. Because I mean it's basically like Uncharted 1 on a portable, with a bunch of gimmicky shit thrown in. Okay, finally Uncharted 4, which I just finished not too long ago, so I have more notes for this game, probably because it's more fresh in my memory than the other games. But yeah, a lot to say about this game. And this game, like with Uncharted 2, got amazing reviews. A lot of people consider this one of the best games ever made. And like with Uncharted 2, I just can't agree with that. Again, I think this game just has too many issues. I think it does make some substantial improvements in gameplay and especially story compared to previous games. It might be the biggest jump in the series for me personally, actually. But I still have a lot of problems with it. I don't think it's like this amazing game. In fact, I don't even see myself putting it on my top 10 list for games of the year. Like I can see myself playing 10 games this year that I'll enjoy more than this one. But let's get started talking about Uncharted 4. This video's gone on a long time. I apologize. This is going to be over an hour long. But yeah, story. A much stronger narrative focus in this game. A lot more cutscenes, longer cutscenes, a lot more dialogue. You got a lot of different flashback scenes in this game. And the main thing with this game is the focus on the relationship between Nathan Drake and Sam, his brother. And immediately that's kind of frustrating to me because his brother has never been mentioned in this series before, ever. Which leads me to suspect that Uncharted 4, I don't know the development behind this game, but I imagine there wasn't originally going to be an Uncharted 4, but because the sales were so strong and people probably kept demanding another Uncharted game, they were just like, fuck it. And then they came up with like this brother angle. And they really try for like this these emotional moments with this game with your brother and the relationship. And I do like the way the relationship is presented over time. I actually like the flashback sequences a little better when they're both kids. But Sam, the character of Sam, I don't actually think he's an especially likable character. I don't know if that's like, it might be intentional. I don't think he's supposed to be a super likable character. He's fairly flawed. But I didn't find him all that compelling. And Uncharted 3 has the same kind of thing where you've got Nathan and Sully's relationship, and it's very similar to Uncharted 4 with the relationship with Sam and Nathan. But I actually preferred Uncharted 3 in that way because I think Sully was a far more interesting character than Sam. Not that Sam's a terrible character. I didn't think he was like this awful character. He's like a bit more rebellious. He's definitely more into the whole like treasure hunting thing. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't love that character, honestly. And I think a lot of like the story depends on you like really getting into that relationship between the two characters. But there's a lot of slow walking sequences in this game too, quite a lot with that increased story focus. I wasn't a fan of that. The dialogue overall is pretty good. There's a lot of bad dialogue though too. I'm kind of mixed on the dialogue. There's a lot of like like those witty, humorous quips that a lot of the characters have that I just roll my eyes at a lot of the times. I feel like there's more of that kind of stuff in this game. But the story in this game is kind of interesting, actually. There were a few surprises for me. The villains. There's kind of like two villains with this game, Raph and Nadine. Now Nadine is not a great character. She's I don't know, like I did not care for her. The way her arc ended was just it was handled kind of poorly. She's never I don't know. It's just weird how she sticks with Raph for such a long time, for like seemingly no reason at all. Um, I don't know. She was kind of eh. But Raph, I actually liked. I thought he was an interesting villain. Uh, Mainly because of the voice actor. The voice actor for him, I don't know who it is. I need to check that, but he really sold that character. He's kind of like this. I don't know. He's like this character that like inherited his family fortune. He's like this rich character, but he shows in the early game that he can be ruthless. And like he's not the most threatening character ever, but I don't know. For whatever reason, I really enjoyed him. I kind of liked that character. Um, what else? I've written a lot here about the story. Um, there's a plot twist that happens later in the game that I wasn't expecting. I was surprised by. Now maybe I'm just stupid and it was telegraphed like a mile away, but basically it was the Sam's story plot twist where he basically uh, where he's like made up the Hector Alvarez story that he helped him break out of prison, and he's gonna come after him if he doesn't get this treasure, Henry Avery's treasure, and the fact that story was made up. I don't know. I wasn't expecting that. So when that plot twist happened, I was actually kind of surprised, and I dug it. Now maybe I'm just stupid there, but yeah, there are still problems with the story. I have quite a few problems with the story. For one, the ludonarrative dissonance in this game is, I think, actually pretty problematic. And this is a lot of people talk about this. It's a problem in a lot of games, but I think it's more problematic here than the other Uncharted games. It didn't bother me so much in the other Uncharted games because they're so over the top and pretty humorous at times, and it's just I don't know. It just didn't bother me all that much. In this game, though, this is probably the darkest Uncharted game, and there's a lot of it goes for a lot of like it goes for like a grounded reality feel a lot, which I think completely clashes with like the over the top situations you get yourself in sometimes. But there's this sequence in the beginning of the game where Nathan is living a married life with Elena, and he's not doing the treasure hunting thing anymore. And it's like this really slow paced sequence where it's just basically showing normalcy, and it really rubbed me the wrong way because they're joking with each other, and he's Nathan's in his attic, and he finds this water gun, and then this like bombastic music plays, and you're shooting this water gun at targets, and Nathan is kind of reminiscing on the old days. I'm just like what the fuck, man? Reminiscing about the old days. Like he's murdered countless people, and it just the whole time through this like sequence I'm just thinking of like all the people he's murdered in his past, and he's living this normal married life, and it's like it just rubbed me the wrong way. That whole sequence did not work for me at all. And it just the ludonarrative dissonance I think was kind of problematic in this game overall, for what the story was trying to do, which is weird because of the director Neil Druckmann. I think apparently he was trying to alleviate that problem with the series, which is hilarious because it's basically at its worst in this game. There is this epilogue at the end where basically you control Nathan's daughter. And this whole epilogue sequence I fucking hated because again it kept reminding me of the fact that your father has like murdered hundreds of people, and now it's like a pass the torch type sequence, and it just felt unnecessary for me. I would have ended it before this. I think the before this there's like this nice kind of proper ending, and I felt like it should have ended there, but instead there's like this extended epilogue sequence, and it seems to exist purely to have more Uncharted games. And I suspect we're going to get more Uncharted games where we're playing Nathan Drake's daughter, which that's really frustrating to me. That whole sequence just really pissed me off. There's a lot of bad dialogue in it too, like a lot of corny dialogue, and that really rubbed me the wrong way. Now, whether or not Naughty Dog will do Uncharted follow-ups, I don't know, but Yeah, that sequence almost seemed designed to basically create a possibility for follow up games, which I always hate when that happens. The story drags at times. The game's like 15 hours long, and it's just too long. The third act, I think, just goes on forever. Um, it's yeah, it definitely drags. Um, but yeah, there's also dialogue choices rarely, which is weird. They're completely meaningless, and I honestly don't understand why they're even there. But yeah, even though the game's got a stronger story focus, and I think the writing is probably the best in the series overall, I still have a lot of issues with it. I still think it's very problematic. It's a shame because it could have been really good, I think. The main story, tracking down Henry Avery's treasure and like this lost utopia, which that's like it's like the same plot in every Uncharted game. But I liked Raph as a villain. I found myself invested and interested in all the cutscenes that were playing, but I don't know, it fell apart a bit towards the end, and then you had all those like that marriage sequence in the epilogue, when the game like slows down and tries to have like those like, I guess just trying to have like these tender, intimate, emotional character moments. It just didn't work for me like at all. But gameplay, we'll talk about the gameplay. It's honestly not that much improved over Uncharted 3. It really isn't. For one, okay, my biggest issue with the gameplay in this game is the pacing overall. Like I think it's got the probably some of the worst pacing in the entire series because there's too much fucking climbing. There is so much climbing in this damn game. It drove me insane. And it's just like the other games. It's just as simplistic. Follow the handholds. There's you got a grappling hook now, and you can swing and get to other walls. You got like this knife that you can like stick in the walls, but that adds almost nothing to these sections. And there's so many of them. They go on forever. They were so boring. But it's actually all the more frustrating because there's a sequence in this game, a climbing sequence that I loved. Yeah, I loved a climbing sequence in the Uncharted series. It was this clock tower sequence where you were climbing up this really tall clock tower. There's all these moving parts. There was a lot more risk and danger compared to like every other climbing sequence in the entire series. And you really had to think about how you were going to progress up this tower. You had to push these switches in a certain order, and there was actually like some non-linearity to it. That you really got the sense that you're really up high and falling to your death would be like really bad. It actually made my hands sweat a bit, which I can't say for like any of the climbing in this series. So it was like this great kind of climbing set piece, and like the series has none of that. It blew my mind that they created this sequence that's so thrilling and so smart. And just like they never do stuff like that. I don't know. It was actually, as much as I enjoyed it, it was actually honestly frustrating at the same time. Gunplay is still fairly mediocre. There's a little more impact when you shoot enemies. Like when they get hit, it feels like a little better compared to previous games. Combat encounters, though, aren't as varied, actually, as other Uncharted games. Stealth is like a bigger focus here. Most of the combat encounters in this game, you'll come to like a wide open area, and the areas in this game are actually more open than they've been in previous games. You're actually like you're generally going from point A to point B, but there's actually a few occasions where you can actually do things your own way and not how the game wants you to do them. But a lot of the common encounters, you come into an area, there's a bunch of patrolling enemies, you mark the enemies, like in Metal Gear Solid 5, you try to take them out stealthily, and it's almost impossible to get through any encounter completely stealthily, because there's just not that many options for stealth, and the way stealth works, it's nothing compared to like a Metal Gear Solid 5. But as soon as you're caught, this is where my problem comes in with these encounters, because as soon as you're caught, basically immediately a bunch more enemies will spawn all around you, and this happens in seconds. And the only way to actually get through encounters quickly is to completely stealth kill everyone. Like it's just so stupid to me that enemies will just spawn like that if you fail these stealth sequences. Like where do they all fucking come from? like I would think maybe the game would be like, oh well, they called reinforcements was because they spotted you, but that doesn't fucking happen. They don't get on like a walkie-talkie or a phone or whatever and call for reinforcements. It's like a second after you're caught, a bunch of enemies come around. And shoot you from everywhere. And if you happen to be in a bad cover spot, you might be dead like instantly. It was very frustrating to me, and like the combat encounters were almost always like this. It was rare when you actually came to a section and had to do combat. I don't know. The stealth is maybe a little improved, but it not by much. It's nice that you can mark the enemies. And now, like enemies, have like these little meters. So if they see you, you're not gonna get caught right away. This meter has to go up, and then it has to change orange, which is nice. And if the enemies spot you and you run away and you hide for a while, they can actually lose you and go back to patrolling, and you can go back into stealth, which I like that too. Like again, like the stealth elements are improved a bit, but they're still not great. And compared to something like Metal Gear Solid 5, it sucks that there's just not a whole lot of options to tackle these combat encounters. And the gunplay itself is still fairly weak. Enemies are still bullet sponges. It's like there's a certain amount of enemies. There's a lot of trial and error designed to this game. Yeah, not not crazy about the gunplay. One improvement with it though that I'm shocked that this hasn't been in the series till now. When you kill an enemy, your reticle will turn red. So you know when you actually kill an enemy. I love that. Why wasn't that in the other Uncharted games? Like, it seems like such a minor thing, but honestly, that was huge for me. I really appreciated that. Yeah, other gameplay things. I guess with the more open environments, you've got some like vehicle sections where you're driving around doing some like very simple environmental puzzles, like attaching a winch to your Jeep and like bringing down a tree to like create a bridge or whatever, which they're simplistic, but they were okay. They added a little bit of variety, I guess. Some of them went on for too long though. Some of the driving sections and the driving controls, they're fine, I guess. I did like the slightly more open nature of these levels. The level design is not quite as linear as previous games, and the areas are just a lot bigger, so there's more opportunities for like finding cover. Although a lot of your cover can get destroyed as well, which can be frustrating, but at the same time, I kind of like it. The AI on enemies is actually better in this game. I did notice that they actually flank you this time. Enemies will rush you more often, throw grenades more often if you're staying in cover too long. Of course, that adds some frustration as well because of the way cover shooting fucking works. And just running from cover to cover and escaping from all the gunfire. Sometimes it's just not going to work out. Enemies will just randomly shoot you a bunch, and then you'll die trying to find other cover. But yeah, as much as the shooting's kind of like weak in this game, I actually feel like there needed to be more of it, surprisingly enough, because I still enjoy it more than the fucking climbing. And it's just the amount of climbing compared to shooting was just, I don't know, it was pretty bad. Set pieces too, there's not as many as in Uncharted 2 and 3, but the set pieces that are in the game I actually kind of liked. They still kind of have the same issues, as previous games. But there's this one where you're like on a rope at the back of a vehicle, and you're like shooting enemies while this car is like carrying you through all the water. And it's this really impressive set piece visually. Like it's not super complex mechanically, but it was kind of neat. I sort of enjoyed it, but there's really not too many set pieces in this game. I imagine that's because they were kind of going for a more grounded, realistic feel with this game, but at the same time, there is set pieces in this game though, so I don't know. But yeah, I list here. There's just not a lot of options for tackling combat encounters. And it's funny too because Metal Gear Solid 5 was obviously an influence with the marking and just the improved stealth mechanics, but it's just comparing that to, like, I know Metal Gear Solid 5 is a proper stealth game, Uncharted's not, but I don't know, it's still a little ridiculous comparing them, I guess. But melee combat was actually more simplified in this game. It's pretty much just mash square in this game, which I found kind of weird. But yeah, melee combat still sucks, just like it's always been shitty in these games. I played the multiplayer a little bit for Uncharted 4. It was actually okay. It was a lot more goofy than the main game, but it was nothing that I was going to spend a lot of time on. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's it with the gameplay. I really don't think it's that much of an improvement over previous games, and the pacing is just really bad, and too much fucking climbing, too much. And that, I guess, covers the Uncharted series. I mean, man, I don't think I ever want to do any climbing in any games ever again. But yeah, those are my opinions on the series. I'm glad I went through them. I did like kind of, following Nathan Drake, and by the end, I liked the character. And it felt like kind of almost like watching like the Indiana Jones trilogy or something, going through these games. But I just don't love them as much as most people do. There's just so much wrong with these games that I can't possibly consider them to be some of like the greatest games ever made. But I don't hate the series like I used to, so I guess that's one thing. I do appreciate some aspects of the series, but yeah, stay tuned for part two where I'll do my ranking. I apologize if this video came off a bit rambling. I don't know. I just sit in front of the camera and talk, but I just have notes here. But yeah, that's it, guys. What do you think of the Uncharted series? I imagine most people are probably more positive on this series than I am, but what are some of your favorites? And maybe what are some of your least favorites? What do you think of the story and gameplay in each of these games? But yeah, part two will have my ranking from least favorite to favorite.